We have Netaji Karthik. He is going to present the webinar, Agile plus OKRs, a dynamic duo for product and engineering success. Netaji Karthik brings expertise and experience to the table, which extend beyond OKRs. He currently serves as a senior consultant for strategy at Profit.co. Netaji has carved a distinguished career path for himself. With a diverse portfolio, he has actively engaged in roles collaborating closely with clients across various industries like IKEA, Home Depot, and Decker's brand, among others. A career adorned with achievements, Netaji Karthik wears many hats and is a multifaceted professional. Who better than Netaji to help us strategize for engineering success today? Netaji, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nisha. That was so much, but I'll take it up with all smiles. All right. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. From where you've been joining on. While, yeah, we all know so aligned about like what are we going to talk about today, I would like to run with a quick pulse check. Just like to get a quick think of like about like who are you, what would best represent your profile, and most importantly, like what is your going to be your primary takeaway from this webinar. Right, let's give a few seconds. You might be seeing a poll posted on your screen. There are two questions. One, helping me to understand the different sort of profiles that I'm going to interact with today. And while we know like, okay, this is going to be so predominantly focused on product and engineering organization, and thanks to all the overwhelming registrations, I see like okay, it's been widespread across different profiles as well. So being really curious to see like, okay, man, what is that? Okay, you have been looking out for, right? All right, sounds good. And operator, like we can move on to the second question. Right, please do look at the poll again. The intent of you being here. I know for many of the people who have been practicing Agile framework and product engineering world, obviously, I would say like a couple of decades back when people started talking about Agile, the transformation when it started all the way from waterfall, right? I mean, that's a predominant way when people were working on it. And during the 2010s, obviously that's where people started talking about Agile predominantly. And that's a big transformational mindset change as we get into this new SDLC model. And now we have a much more even a revised transformation approach wherein OKRs is going to reframe and transform how Agile can be much more meaningful and powerful. Wonderful. And I believe we can share the results at least to showcase like, okay, man, how are we looking at all this information out there? All right, it looks like pretty much most of you people I see like gonna be a little curious in terms of how Agile and product management is connected together. No wonders. I know probably it started with SAFe 4.0 as part of Enterprise Agile. SAFe started saying that, okay, man, Agile, if you're doing Agile, if whatsoever framework that you follow within Agile, be it Sprint, Scrum, a SAFe or whatsoever methodology, SAFe was stating that it's time to connect your product strategy and business strategy using OKRs, right? And I see like the second most important one, obviously you also see like, okay, man, people understanding in terms of how these two get connected together, predominantly the typical use cases that we're going to talk about it today. Wonderful. All right, sounds good. Thanks for those wonderful insights. So with that, let's jump into the topic for today. But before we jump in, I know like for the people that joined in the beginning of the webinar today, would have gone through a quick video on about profit. It was a quick peek about what our customers say about us. And that was a cool and exhilarating video, isn't it? Well, I'm not exaggerating, right? I mean, it's more about the fact, right? That what our customers speak about us, because based upon the value that we deliver to them. So who we are, right? So the answer to that, so we are Profit, the platform providers for an end-to-end strategy execution solutions, which means You can't be at the top level, C-level people. I see like we have a bunch of C-level people sitting on this table as well. So you can be the top level people thinking about what should be my long-term range plan, talking about how can I transform my vision and mission into all the way to an executionable element. You have a strategy module in place. You can use a custom way of, there is a custom way of defining a strategic framework, which gets achieved by the strategy module over here. If you're so engrossed to balance scorecard, yes, that's another module that we offer. And for people that are so engrossed on core and tactical planning, wherein you talk about converting your annual operating plan. And that's where we have the OKRs in place, right? And then you get onto the operational layer. You really need something to orchestrate your day-to-day activities. And that's where we bring in the task management in place. That precisely helps you to align all the business performance layers. But then this is all going to be get executed by the people layer. How are you going to get accounted for the people management skills? How do you ensure that your people stay motivated to help you to drive those strategies? And that's where we talk about the employee development and employee engagement module, precisely the need of the performance management system, continuous performance management. That's another module that we've been talking about. And anything what you do, if people do not stay motivated, there is going to be a recipe for disaster in the near future. How can you override those kind of a change management issues? And that's where you need to talk about employee engagement. So engagement, rewards, appreciations, that's another kind of module within the OKR platform that we offer. So put together, so we have a comprehensive suite of different solutions catering whatsoever different things that you need to do the entire end-to-end strategy execution, right? And that's what we are. While again, I'm not exaggerating about like, we are the most best to provide the strategy execution platform, but then the awards that we have got for ourselves can truly speak to our achievements. So that's a quick peek of some of the accolades that we have received in the past year, ranging from the awards that we received from Gartner, G2, Capterra, Software Advice, whatsoever it is, right? Typically, whatsoever that needs most important to honor any SaaS companies, right? So that's where we are. And apart from that, we also get recognized by Gartner, predominantly in the digital workplace hype cycle. Along with that, Forrester and IDC also has recognized us or referenced us as part of a solution provider to execute OKRs, right? And last but not the least, while I know like this is predominantly being orchestrated by product and engineering organization, don't just think that OKRs is only for tech companies or companies where IT and product engineering involves. A simple question or simple answer to that is that wheresoever you see a strategy in, be it a business strategy, product strategy, wheresoever there is a strategy in, you will be able to implement OKRs. Let us also start with, right, while you guys help me to understand your, at least what brings you here based upon the different options being showed on, realizing that, okay, been curious to understand how OKRs get connected with Agile, right? But I would say like everything has a problem statement to resolve. If you do not find a problem statement to talk about any new topic, framework, white paper, whatsoever it is, there is no point in doing that. So let us also understand, why do we really have to do this, right? So let's start with quick facts or quick statistics in terms of what we need to know as a product manager, or if you're a product leader, this is something like you need to get yourself well versed with. So look at the poll. There is a question indicating like what percentage of product managers struggling to align their product roadmap with the company's strategic priorities. So there is a range of different aspects, and let's see with what's the number turn out to be. Right. I see that the majority goes in terms of indicating towards 25 to 50%. And I would say that pat on yourself, guys, right? When you are the product managers, and I must admit that you must be knowing about this simple fact, right? And again, like it's not something I have to call it out as my own statistics. This is something coming out from Pragmatic Institute, right? PMI states that literally it is 42% of product managers saying that, okay, they do not really know, or trying to balance out how they can connect their product strategy with the business strategy. You know what? Literally, these two organizations typically operate in a kind of a siloed fashion. Based upon my practical implementation or experience with consulting many customers, this is very one common problem statement stating that, hey, the leadership guys, the executive leadership team come up with whatsoever they need to do that should help them to achieve their 3-year, 5-year long-term range plan. And then the CPO office, they are having a different vision indicating how they have to craft their product or how their product roadmap should look like. They have a product strategy that aligns their product roadmap. But ultimately, the key point is that the people at the next level precisely move on to the product heads, product leaders, product managers, whomsoever it is. There always needs to be a cue that thinks that how I will be able to align my whatsoever I'm doing at the moment, right? When being a product manager, I should be talking something about like, what am I going to do for the upcoming 3 months as part of my PI cycle or as part of my quarterly Scrum cycle, right? But then, do I end up picking the right set of product features, epics to be prioritized so that it so aligns with my business strategy? How do I ensure that they are not a siloed organization anymore? Both of them are equivalently talking to each other, right? So that's number one problem statement. Precisely look at the facts. PMI indicates that we still have a good bunch of PMs or the product organization stating that, yes, there has been a siloed way of working between product organization and the entire leadership defining the business strategy, right? And that's not enough. I'm also going to talk about another special statistics, right? Let's look at the second question to have an interesting information. So please look at the screen now. There is a question which tells what percentage of customers, literally your end customers, depending upon the product that you design and deliver, it could be either your B2C end users or it could be B2B, your business users, but whomsoever the end users that you've been targeting on, your customers, agreeing to the value that whatsoever you're delivering by the product teams, you as a product manager, product head, you've been delivering something which is so aligning and resonating with them. And I'm pretty sure this time, as a majority group, you're not going to reach up to that numbers. Right, I see still a good population of numbers pulling in. Let's give a couple of more seconds to get a few more additional. All right, okay. Sounds good. And still, okay, probably this time we should show the results just to see that, okay, since that we are not aligning over here, probably let's share these results. While I see the majority again goes align in terms of 50 to 75% people agreeing to the value delivered. But the reality is going to be extreme bitter one. And again, it's not something I stated. This is some insight which is coming up from BNC, the Bain & Company. The alarming fact is that while everyone is so aligned with the perceived value, the problem with the entire product management world, even when you do the prioritization, is that we try to, even as part of doing a value effort matrix to come up with the prioritized features, the value that we try to pick it up is predominantly going to be based upon perceived value. But that's not going to be the same when we get into the reality. As per Bain & Company, it's only 8% of your end users typically agreeing to the fact that, yeah, we see that whatsoever we wanted to get that delivered probably like 2 cycles back, 3 cycles back, we believe that our perceived value aligned with the product delivery. But then when we see the reality in place, they do not agree to that. That's a much more alarming number. 92% goes way out of track. And you know what? The main problem statement here is that as a product organization, when we deliver certain features, whatsoever it may be, the time to realize value doesn't align with my product delivery. As a product manager, I'm so focused on what am I supposed to do for the upcoming quarter. I'm going to be so focused on, I need to be running upfront of my engineering team so that I maintain a healthy backlog, right? However, I do not have a time to go back what I delivered 3 cycles back, 4 cycles back, and be able to see that if whatever I delivered aligning with the perceived value, does it really align with the actual value or not? And that's what this problem statement talks about, right? That's much more, I would say, like that's a really an alarming fact. We should be finding literally a different way to handle this problem statement, right? And if that is not enough, let us also look one more final statistic from Pendo. They do, let's look at the question from Pendo, which talks about what percentage of product managers struggle with prioritizing features that deliver the most value to the customers. Right, and I believe like you should be back onto track now. So this is again one of the common problems. Every product manager is going to see on as part of your quarterly Scrum cycle or PI cycle, right? I'm expecting this to get aligned with the majority again. All right, so I see more than 50% of the participants literally say that the range falls between 25 to 50%, right? And that's so right, I would say, right? If you look at what Pendo has to talk about this, it says 48% of product managers really do not, or finding it little difficult to really align with what matters the most. So which talks about the fact that we really have a gap in the traditional product prioritization approach. People talk about Kano, people talk about rice model, rice coding, or it could be Moscow, t-shirt sizing, value of foot matrix, Eisenhower, whatsoever it could be the different ones. Until otherwise, you bring in an ability to track the actual value on top of your perceived value drop. This gap will still continue to exist, right? So if these are the problems for me, precisely, we are going to talk about a solution to these problems by bringing in OKRs on top of your Agile framework. And that's what we are precisely going to talk about it in the next 10, 15 odd minutes, right? So knowing that we have these problem statements, we know practically these are the problem statements for us. So let's understand how OKRs is going to make my Agile framework to be more powerful and meaningful, so that I end up delivering the actual value what has been intended to my end users or the customers, right? So let me bring a theoretical way of representing it. Probably like every new methodology has a framework to start with, similar to that OKR and Agile combination too. That also has a combined framework that tells that how this works seamlessly. So to start with, this is all we do, right? We as a product leaders or as a product managers, we end up saying that, okay, this is my product strategy getting defined at the CPO level or the product leaders level. And then I'm going to use that to define my roadmap, define my capabilities at different levels, helping me to come up with functionality features and drilling down to the lowest level, talking about user stories, tasks, whatsoever it is. And ultimately that gets planned out by means of different sprints over a period of time. That's a typical product cycle that we've been talking about, orchestrated by Agile delivery, right? In parallel, right, as you mentioned, there is two different siloed operations. One is the product leaders talking about the product strategy. Similar to that, I have an executive leadership team that talks about the business strategy or the corporate strategy. I picked up where the LTT is going to use OKRs to execute their OKRs, execute their strategy execution, right? Now, these are two different siloed organizations, I would say at the moment. The answer to this puzzle is so simple. All we are going to say that is that somewhere we need to find a way to align and interconnect both this product strategy and the overall business strategy. So in other words, we've been talking about establishing these OKRs as a mean to talk between your business strategy and your execution strategy. From a framework perspective, it's so simple. It is OKRs definitely is going to abide by the Agile manifestos, right? One of the Agile manifestos, wherein we say less documentation and more deliverables, more work. Precisely that is what OKRs is also going to recommend for using Agiles as well. So there is two different siloed worlds as we talk about over here. There is a product world dealing with the product strategy or executing the product strategy. And then there is a leadership team that's so focused on crafting their business strategy and see like how they can execute their business strategy, which goes much beyond the product execution, right? So product strategy is going to be one of the strategies for the business, for the executive leadership team. But how do I ensure that these two are so aligned and connected with each other, right? The answer to that question, as we see about from a framework, just going to make sure that these two strategies talk to each other. We find a way how these can be established together, right? And believe me, this is the only theoretical slide. I'm going to showcase it now. And I'm going to run through this strategy or this framework with a much more practical example, how we can make this framework into life, right? And precisely, this is why I always used to call that connecting your product strategy and business strategy, or making your product strategy to talk about with the actual value instead of posit value. That's not going to be a white paper topic anymore. It's really something getting into reality. And we have ample use cases where we have implemented this approach for their product and engineering organization, right? While I say about this is how the framework should be, and again, just like whatsoever the problem statement that I said, it's being supported by PMI, Bain & Company, and Pendo. Similar to that, there is also a supporting statement for the framework that I'm just talking about. If you talk about, if you're an organization following SAFe as your Agile framework, which has been calling about, if you look at SAFe and then look at the enterprise Agile SAFe diagram, obviously there is a specific section for OKRs, which talks about how you should be connecting your strategy, how literally you can use your OKRs connected business strategy and product strategy to even define your epics and features. There's a pretty good amount of reading that has been being published in the Scaled Agile framework. Along with that, Scrum has its own representation in terms of how it should work on. And there is also another quote from PMI or the Pragmatic Institute again, which talks about how we can align this, the value delivery mapping, literally talking about the connection between roadmap and the business outcome. It's nothing but your value, connecting your value drops or doing a value-based delivery mapping, right? So we have ample evidences, we have ample information, we have ample artifacts as a white paper concept talking about how it should operate on. But here in this webinar, in the next 5-10 minutes, I'm going to run through a much more practical way of driving these concepts, right? So hope we are pumped up to see how that literally works as a practical scenario. But prior to that, I'm also going to bring on another question to you now. You as a product leaders, product or representing a product organization, a quick question to you, right? I mean, let's see the poll now, just to see like, okay, how do you track your value drop, right? Or the outcome. So typically people talking about the value drop or the outcome as part of the epics or the features that you're delivering over multiple sprints. I'm just talking about a bunch of tools that are being used, right? I mean, I have been myself a product manager for a good long amount of time, and I have my fair share of doing this by means of all the ways what I have represented over here. And again, like it's not something like what others talk about. This is our own personal experience. This is my own personal experience in implementing this for multiple organizations, right? So as expected, right, I see like predominantly this is the most important one, right? Man, if I've been so honest about this, what I did while I was a product manager, I simply documented my value drop as a hypothesis in my epic. So when I define my epic in Jira, GitLab, DevOps, wherever it may be, when I wrote my epic for my engineering team, all I did was that I wrote my benefit hypothesis, saying that this is why I'm going to write or going to design and deliver this epic on, right? So let's see the results, indicating like, okay, what do we see on over here? So as indicated, literally close to 70% of people calling out the fact that yes, it is getting tracked over some kind of a ticketing tool. And obviously, to be honest, yes, Atlassian provides a wonderful aspect of tracking all these different tickets, right? So that's so correct. Again, as the problem is that wheresoever different places that you define over here, it's going to sit as one of an artifacts. You're just going to document this as a pointer in some kind of a documentation. Nothing else beyond that. And that's where the problem is. We do not want to define certain benefit hypothesis just for the sake of defining it. And that's where we lack the probability or the possibility to connect that benefit with the actual value drop, right? Let's see one last question before we jump into the actual exercise. I also would like you to understand as a product manager, right? It's always, we know that the benefit validating at the end of the sprint cycle, at the end of the 3 months, there is always going to be some problem in terms of, okay, how I will be able to validate my value drop. And my experience as a product manager, right, wherein I have done this conversations with my business heads just to ensure that, okay, I mean, how do they perceive the value drop that has happened on? However, one of the predominant problem is about the, I might not be able to have some kind of a quantifiable way to measure those metrics. Number two, the time lag. When I deliver something, the time to realize those actual benefits might happen 1 or 2 cycles after I deliver that product, right? While I might be able to validate those benefits from a smaller subset or a population wherein I have implemented those features, the insights from the larger mass always is going to take on some time. And during that time, obviously, there is a certain user behavioral characteristics which is going to influence that decision as well. So literally, what's the reason that you see here, right? All the 3, that's literally going to be applicable in terms of helping us to evaluate, right? Wherein these are the predominant reasons for us. All the 3 are equally valid. There is nothing right or wrong over here. This is predominantly a practical experience. You as an PM should have realized or experienced it as part of trying to evaluate a product, right? So with all those information in our mind, let's jump onto the core topic. We saw the problem statement. We saw the practical challenges. We saw the methodology or the framework, how it should act on, right? Let's give a sneak peek, a trailer about like how this gets executed, how it can be executed in reality, right? So we are going to empower our product managers literally with an OKR embedded agile approach. We are not going to focus on the ways of working. We are not going to focus on the manifestos, the principles, how it needs to be followed. In the limited time for this webinar, we'll just quickly see a practical example. I just picked up for this simulation use case, I just picked up a banking example. I assume that, okay, we are going to do a role play wherein we represent a financial organization or a fintech company. And we are all going to represent a product and engineering organization as part of this fintech company. So it could be as simple as that I need to have some kind of an enhancements to a net banking app, right? So we all be having different mobile banking apps in our mobile, right? So it's all about visualizing ourselves in terms of some of the new features that I want to bring onto the table as part of enhancing it for this banking company, right? So let's see like how it unfolds. So as I mentioned, it all starts with the business strategy, right? We're still going to align with what we saw as part of the framework. We have 2 different siloed organizations, right? Within the same group, we have the business team, we have the leadership team going to so much focused on defining the business strategy. And that's how I'm looking at this one, right? Literally my top level leadership team saying that my overarching vision is to empower my customers with anytime, anywhere banking facility, right? If that's my holistic strategic mission that I want to achieve over a period of time, it's going to get delivered by means of different strategic initiatives. Somewhere you can also define it as part of some metrics wherein I do this because I should be able to garner 1 billion in deposits over a period of time. That's my outcome or the business outcome that I'm trying to achieve by means of executing the strategy statement. And I'm going to get supported by 2 different strategic directives talking about the kind of a unified banking experience and having a future-proof integrated banking solution. So all different products of the banking solution can get conglomerated together, right? And that's going to be represented as simple as an OKR. And again, like we're not going to talk about like what is an OKR and how OKR aligns over here. The understanding is that we all have a fair understanding of OKRs. Pretty much it's a combination of objective indicating what I want to achieve, a goal, and the key results indicating my metrics that will help me to evaluate the success of my objective, right? So the corporate team or the executive leadership team defines their strategic vision in some form of OKRs in a combination of qualitative and quantitative fashion, but with an ultimate vision to garner more than 1 billion in deposits. So that's where I'm moving towards having the strategic statement for me, right? Now, who we are the product leaders, and regardless of what my leadership team does as part of their 3 years, 5 year strategic plan, I'm always going to have a bunch of things that I want to do as part of my product strategy, right? While I haven't talked about the product strategy yet, but I got into the little bit minor granular detail, wherein as a product manager or as a product head, I'm so focused on a bunch of epics and features that I want to develop over a period of time, which will help me to mature my product over a period of time. So I'm literally upping the ante for my product capability, right? I'm making my product more mature. I'm trying to garner more customers to my product, trying to increase the stickiness rate or whatsoever outcome that I want to put it on. But ultimately, I'm dealing with a bunch of epics or features that I want to develop over a period of time, right? So these are the two siloed worlds that we talked about, right? If you remember that. Now, if you remember, I also said that with OKRs in place as part of an agile-driven approach, we are not going to bring in much fancified work to this framework. As I mentioned, definitely OKR merits the Agile Manifesto principles, which means the level of changes in the ways of working is going to be so simple. What are we going to do? Rather than defining your benefit hypothesis, all your benefit hypothesis sits over here for every one of those metrics, right? Or every one of those epics or features. It's all going to sit in Jira, GitLab, as you have pulled out, right? But that's the majority we talked about. The very first step or the only step that we are going to do is that take away those benefit hypotheses rather than representing as a documentation. We are going to define that benefit hypothesis as a measurable metric as a key result, right? Indicating that my value drop, whatsoever I want to do it on, probably you call it as your PI goal, your sprint goal, whatsoever it may be, but the value drop that I am going to focus on, that needs to get translated as a key result, and more importantly, aligning with my business strategy, right? The moment I define my value drop as my key result, it will find its way into aspects. One, if this is the value drop, this is going to help me among the pool of different epics that I have identified for myself, that will help me to focus or prioritize out of 100 different backlog of epics. These are the 5 different epics that I need to prioritize. Why? Because that will help me to do this value drop. And most importantly, this value drop is going to align with my business strategy, right? We kind of hit two foods in a stone, right? One, we have been able to establish my alignment with the business strategy in terms of the kind of value drop that we've been doing on. Number 2, I will also be able to determine what kind of features that I need to pick it on as part of my prioritization for the respective PI cycle that you'll be doing, right? So that's one aspect of it, right? Let us also look at the second one. This will help us also to ideate based upon what my top level leadership wants me to do. While this is something I might have never thought about in terms of ideating my products. But I see that this is something stemming up from the top level leadership team. It says that, okay, I need something to do with in terms of an integrated banking solution. And if I have to deliver this kind of a value or an outcome, then which means I need to ideate myself to come up with a related set of epics. Now, if you see that, we've been talking about the third use case, which helps me to evaluate or determine what kind of epic that I need to ideate for myself, giving much more thought process to the product organization. And this is going to be kind of aligned altogether, right? By default, it is aligned with the business strategy, because all these epics are literally getting originated and ideated based upon what your top level business team wants you or wants the product organization to do, right? Last on the list, I did all these things as part of my PI planning or quarterly sprint planning. The rest, if I do not have anything else which doesn't have any alignment, either in terms of a top-down planning approach or a part of bottom-up planning approach, the rest of the other things, literally, I do not have to prioritize for this quarterly period. We all know that we need to categorize this segment into now, next, and the future. So these, the greens and the yellows are the ones that I need to focus on now. And the gray ones, it's definitely not for this quarterly cycle. Probably it can be picked up for the next or the future PI cycles, right? The only exception could be to that is that you might be having some kind of a tech debt or enabler epics. And that's something which will not have an alignment to your business strategy, which you can pick it up based upon the need to support your business epics. All right. So that's the way we will be bringing life to the framework that we talked about, effectively helping us to augment our end-to-end planning, right? All the way from how we start doing our product strategy, product road mapping, product discovery, right? It just simply stops, it doesn't stop over here. Literally, OKRs have a pretty much wide use cases as well. You will be able to even get the help of OKRs to lead your product discovery. Any kind of an articulated research questions based upon the connection with the business strategy and the product strategy based upon the OKRs which dwells together. So literally, you will be able to establish an end-to-end traceability, right? All the way from the business strategy to the product strategy, right? So just to recap what we talked about, right? We had a pretty good, nice way of seeing how this framework, right? OKR as a process framework sits on top of any agile frameworks, helping us to solve the most common challenges and problem statements for the product organization, right? So just to talk about that, recollect that, we saw the statistics from Pragmatic, knowing that number of people or the percentage of PM struggling to align this product strategy with the business strategy, you're going to find a use case which will help you to connect these two things together, right? The previous simulation use case that we talked about for the banking industry, we've been able to find how the business strategy gets aligned with the product strategy, right? That's number one. Number two, from Bain & Company, the most important problem, only 8% of PMs trying to align this actual POSIT value with the actual value. Literally, we need some kind of a value-based delivery mapping. While we didn't pick up this use case to be discussed in detail, literally, that's the next most important use case, right? Wherein you will be able to realize how probably like you might have picked up your Q1 epics to be delivered, right? Probably that POSIT value was evaluated at the end of Q1. With OKRs as a framework, you will be able to realize and track all the way from Q1 to Q2 to Q3 to Q4 until the time that you want to monitor on, right? And that will help you to evaluate and compare between your actual value and the POSIT value. And if the POSIT value doesn't map up with the actual value, then that will stem up for the retrofitting of subsequent epics that you need to do on to make your product much more robust to address that gap in the perceived value versus actual value, right? While that is not a use case that we intended, but just calling it out, that's another important use case that we can talk about over here. The third on the list, wherein we talked about a statistics from Pendo, wherein 48% of product managers saying that, okay, it's not easy to do this prioritization. While we talked about a bunch of product prioritization frameworks, right? We talked about Masco, t-shirt sizing, price scoring, Kano, value effort matrix, whatsoever it is. But ultimately, if that doesn't connect back with the perceived value, none of the product prioritization frameworks or methodologies is going to help us. So literally, OKRs will help us to address that gap as well in terms of bridging that gap between perceived value and the actual value, ultimately, and helping us to address on what features that I need to pick out for each and every sprint cycle or the PI cycle, right? Put together, I would say like these are the three predominant benefits or the use cases for the product leaders and product managers to start implementing OKRs as part of their agile cycle. All right. So again, whatsoever we quoted, you should be able to see an ample references in terms of SAFe being talking about this, Scrum being talking about this, but definitely you need an executable model just to tell that, okay, how this framework can be executed and implemented in practical way of doing this, right? And I would say that that's literally our path to enablement. As I talked about, anything to start with the change, it needs to go with people, process, and technology. It started with the why to question that. Now it's time to come into the specifics of that people, process, and technology. Right? With people, that has been taken care, wherein the leaders, you as the product managers or as the product leaders, will be able to address that gap of people element, process element. While whatever we saw in the last 30 minutes, just a quick peek of what OKRs can do for. There are three other use cases, right? Or two other use cases which we haven't explored further. And literally, you really need to know how you can bring it onto the table for your day-to-day executional operations, right? Which means the most important thing is that you should not be disturbing your DevOps or your engineering team. Those people should not be thinking that this is going to be an additional framework on top of Agile or Scrum or Kanban or what's a different kind of frameworks being followed. We truly need to respect the Agile manifestos, right? Less documentation, more work. So you really need to have a crystal way in terms of how this ways of working has to be different. It is just not going to be like, okay, as a product leader, I define the product strategy. I then stem it out among my product managers to co-ideate my product discovery leading up to different bunch of epics and features. That's not the usual way of doing this. You literally need to have a refined ways of working that will help you to move towards this enablement path, right? So, which means there is a bit of learning that has to go on as part of process enablement. And how can you get that process enablement? And that's where we also have a dedicated program, especially for the product managers. So we have multiple versions of OKR program, and this is something which is going to be so focused for the product managers, right? And precisely the OKR workshops or the case study workshops that we will be doing on, this will ensure that you crack a business case study wherein you will be not only you will be able to ideating the different set of OKRs, the different set of product epics, but also it will help you to understand how you will be able to connect your product strategy with the business strategy, how you will be able to prioritize the epics that you need to pick it up for the respective sprint planning basis on the alignment with your business strategy, right? So that's a 6-hour learning program coming up, that comes up with a certification as well. That I would say like that's one of an enabler for you to address that process aspect. Technology aspect, obviously, definitely this, since that the enabler is going to be OKRs, we at Profit, we also have enabler to connect between this business strategy and product strategy. And regardless of the tool that you use, be it Jira, GitLab, DevOps, so we have a framework, we have a methodology in place that will ensure that we will be able to connect all these puzzles together. All right. So I would say that collectively put together, whatsoever it is in terms of different aspects, right? Any change that you need to bring in, it starts with the why. We spend a good amount of time in understanding that why in terms of understanding or getting into the problem statement. But most importantly, it is to understand. The next steps is to evolve after we understand and realize that, okay, these are the problems that we see in a practical life. it's time to bring change into that problem statement. Looking at all the three elements, people, process, and technology. So people, you're covered. With process, we bring in a program for product managers, and for tool or for the technology, OKR is the mean. When Profit's OKR platform has an ability to connect between your business strategy and corporate strategy, aligning with whatsoever ticketing tools that will be bringing. All right, so with that, we literally come to the end of this webinar today. As Nisha pointed out in the beginning of the webinar, the surprise gift or the giveaway for people that are part of this webinar itself is that you can look at this QR code, or there is a coupon code that has been published as well. The process enabler that we talked about, it's going to come out at a discounted price, goes on to 30%. So if you seem to be interested in getting into this more about this topic, you can jump in and then dive into to get a peek onto this program with a discounted pricing on it, right? And the second thing, it's the giveaway doesn't restrict only for the product leaders program. We also have other set of programs if you're purely interested only to know about OKRs. I mean, I see that there is a bunch of people from C-level team, there is a leaders from HR, sales. OKRs is not only for product management. OKR is not only for strategy management. You can also use it for program management. You can also use it for people management. So if you want to understand how that can be helpful for the other specific user personas, you can also get enrolled in other programs, which will talk about the exploration towards other user personas as well. All right, so you'll be getting this deck, so don't worry about this QR code or the coupon code. With that, we get into the Q&A section. Over to Nisha.
Yeah, thank you, Netaji. That was most insightful, and really, I was really involved in all the Q&A you had and the polls that you conducted. I hope our listeners were also equally involved with the whole OKR process that you presented for them. Quickly, let's jump into the Q&A session. There are couple of questions. The first one is, in terms of scalability, how can Agile and OKRs be adapted for use in large enterprises? And what challenge may arise as organizations attempt to implement these methodologies at scale?
Great. Okay. All right. It was a precise question. Precisely, this talks about the fact that, okay, you've been thinking about how you can get it into the next level, right? So it's a first step towards implementation. Again, a simple answer to this question is that, forget about Agile, forget about OKRs. Any new change that you bring in, I would say the very first problem is going to be in the change management. And obviously, when you try to implement at larger scale, as I mentioned, you just cannot implement this by reading certain materials, by running into a white paper or an article. You really need to understand how this operates on. And most importantly, it really needs to connect with the value, right? Until otherwise, you talk about the fact that, okay, why are we doing this? What are the benefits of us doing this? And how we can retrospect that benefits at a later point of time to the entire organization. Then it will not be possible to get this implemented. So predominantly, the change management is going to be the predominant problem. I would say training is if you have been part of the product and engineering organization, I know Agile coaching, right? Obviously, if you run into any kind of an Agile training program, that's a 2-day intensive program, right? You might not have to get into that level of intensive training, but I would say rather than disturbing the DevOps engineering, I would say it needs to start predominantly with the product managers and the product owners, who are the people who will be bringing this change as part of connecting this business strategy and the product strategy. So the C-level team will still focus on the business strategy. The product leadership team will still focus on product strategy and product discovery, but it is the PMs and the POs who is going to help us to bridge that gap. And I would say that we need to start focusing on this user persona first. Let them get into that understanding how we can orchestrate it, and we need to take it up from there. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Netaji. The second question is, considering the cross-functional nature of Agile teams, how can organizations ensure effective communication and collaboration between product, engineering, and other departments when they are implementing OKRs?
I would say this is a so simple question. to understand that, right? If you also, if I go a couple of slides back, wherein I talked about the core contents of the OKR program for product managers. While it's so focused for the product managers, but it also talked about the basics in terms of what OKRs are. The reason why it is so important is that, especially to start your, to understand or to explain to your question, right? How do I ensure that the effective communication and collaboration? Just like what you talk about as part of having Scrum ceremonies or Agile ceremonies, there is also a bunch of Agile ceremonies. Or sorry, there is also a bunch of OKR ceremonies as well, right? And most importantly, it is when I talked about ways of working, it is so engrossed to tell that how you can amalgamate your OKR ceremonies on top of Agile ceremonies so that people do not see that as two different frameworks. Instead, both of them are seamlessly aligned and represented, right? So it is about to understand. So we all know that what you do as part of daily stand-up. We all know that, okay, what are we going to do as part of the 2-week sprint retro? We all know that what are you going to discuss as part of quarterly sprint planning cycle. But with the OKR planning cycle, how do you know that what are you supposed to do as part of your OKR planning aligning with your product strategy? How do you know that your OKR execution ceremony is connected with your, even with your daily stand-ups, right? That's the way of working. That's the ceremony that we have been talking about, which will blend on top of your existing Agile or Scrum ceremonies to make this communication so seamless.
Okay. So this is also about change management. How do you address resistance from team members or stakeholders when transitioning to Agile and OKRs? And what strategies can be employed to foster a positive mindset towards these methodologies?
Okay. So with the practical experience, right? While I've been constantly saying that, okay, when we stop at product managers level, product owners level, that's for a reason. If you read what SAFe recommends, it also tells that you can go until the level where you can even track and user story, issue, or a task. But in my practical experience, this is where I would say that we should not be doing that. If you do that, the question that you asked on, that will effectively pop up. While you might be getting a granularity in terms of what is that each and everyone has been doing on, but that's not something what we as a product leaders should not be focusing on. We literally should be focusing on the value. So rather than focusing or disturbing your DevOps team in terms of what they do and if their user stories, if you go to that level, rather than kind of establishing that traceability at that level, if you stop it at the epic or the feature level where the little value drop happens, this of change management will automatically go away. The key to this is that do not bring a feel that this is an additional burden or this is an additional framework on top of what your entire DevOps teams do, right? And if you bring in the traceability at the user story or the task level, that's where you're going to see the resistance. But if you stop at tracking at the epic or the value drop level, this is more of a mere ways of working that your PMs need to adopt to enable this end-to-end traceability. Right.
So we have a question here from Balamurgan. How can we ensure that Profit.co OKRs align seamlessly with our product strategy within our Agile framework, enabling us to prioritize initiatives effectively and drive towards our long-term product vision? I think, yeah.
People that are so focused on product management, right? When I have seen people doing this by getting into, let's say, Jira Align. They obviously Jira Align promotes that, okay, they can do all the tracking from a business strategy perspective. But the key to the puzzle is all about defining your outcomes as part of an OKR. So at Profit.co, literally the platform that we have, you will be able to define your business strategy and product strategy altogether. And I have seen companies where they even define their product strategy, roadmap, capabilities, everything sitting in PowerPoints and Excels. And then they try to execute by means of having their execution in Jira GitLab. So what does it really mean is that your product strategy sits in one system, like even if it is Excel, right? That's another system that we've been talking about. And then your business strategy sits somewhere in another set of spreadsheets. And then your product management sits in systems like GitLab or Jira, right? Clearly, these three are siloed to each other. There is no connection until otherwise I manually try to establish a traceability among them. So with with this problem statement in mind, literally at profit.co, you will be with a platform in place connecting both strategy and OKRs. You will be able to define your roadmap. Let's say like you have everything being done in Excel world, or you have defined everything in different systems, right? With Profit, you will be able to bring in all your product strategy, your business strategy, your roadmap, your initiatives, everything under one platform. It seamlessly sits on top of Jira, GitLab, whatsoever it is, helping you to establish that last mile connectivity in terms of what your product team has been actually delivering on as part of your value drops. So that's how it establishes that connect.
Still a couple more questions, Netaji. How can teams strike a balance?
We should take one last, just considering the time for the others.
Okay. Okay, let me take this question for you. How are leading indicators utilized within the Agile and OKR framework to provide early insights into potential challenges or opportunities, allowing teams to adjust their strategies productively?
All right, okay. So this is I would say this is the trade secret, right? When we talked about the value-based delivery mapping, right? We purposefully didn't want to focus completely onto that use case because that's pretty much what our USP is all about. So yes, the answer, at least you try to crack out one of the keys to that puzzle. Obviously, with the combination of lead indicators sitting on top of Agile and OKR framework, and that's where pretty much we are trying to crack out that problem statement, helping us to precisely understand, okay, if my perceived value is not going to align with my actual value, these leading indicators is going to act as the key for me to help me understand, okay, what are the potential challenges that I'm going to run. Right.
Thank you, Netaji. And I think you've answered almost all the questions. And with that, we come to the end of the webinar. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks. That allowed all the questions. Thank you so much. Let's see you later. Bye-bye.